Hello, BookTube. I was gently reminded the other day that it's been a while since I made a Hedgehog book recommendation video, so I thought I would do that today and hope that nothing goes wrong in the process. It's a long story, but I'm expecting things to go wrong. I do not actually expect that anyone is going to see the videos that I make today. I don't believe they're going to successfully upload. But these are random book recommendations that are named after Christopher Russell, who Joe Spivey dubbed our little corner BookTube's cartoon Hedgehog. He did a video eons ago with just random book recommendations, and that was all I needed to start making random book recommendations of my own. So I've been doing that, and I wanted to do another one for you today. It's been a while, so I may duplicate a book here and there, but you can just take that as the persistence with which it is on my mind. So we'll start with this by Frank Spearing. And there are many kinds of recommendations, right? I can urgently recommend you to read something because it is incredibly good, or I can urge you to recommend something because it is incredibly fun. Those two don't have to be the same thing. There are both types on this list. And the first one is the fun kind. This is his book, Prince Jack. And this is his hyperventilating, absolutely hysterical, completely insane theory as to who was the real identity of Jack the Ripper. As he makes clear very early on in the book, he believes that it was Prince Albert Victor, the son of Prince Edward, Prince Bertie, who was heir to the throne of Queen Victoria. And Spearing isn't interested in investigating. He isn't interested in making his case. He is just interested in yelling at you. This book is basically one gigantic exclamation point, but it is so much fun. It is so much fun. And as an entry in Ripperology, it is completely worthless. Prince Albert Victor was certainly not Jack the Ripper. but nevertheless, it's hilarious fun. So then we can do a book that was recently reprinted. This is Elsa Maxwell, and this is her book, How to Do It. This is a book about entertaining. I suspect a largely lost art among the 90% of the people in the world who have no money. 10% of the people in the world have more money than anyone has ever had in the history of the universe. But 90% don't. 90% don't. They don't have an extra room. They don't have $1,000 set aside. They don't entertain, ever. They might have a friend over for chicken nuggets, but something like that. But this was from a time when that was possible. On a middle class income, you could entertain. You could have people over in a formal way. A semi-formal way where you care about who you're seating next to each other, you care about the procession of the meals and the procession of the drinks. And Elsa Maxwell was the queen of that. And she wrote a number of books, but How to Do It was her most popular one. And even as a historical artifact, I bet you will find it interesting. I don't remember who she got to write it. But it's very entertaining to read. Then we have something that would count as one of those. I mentioned, I can recommend something for the cheesy fun of it, or I can recommend something in earnest, something you genuinely should read. This is one of the latter kind. This is God Knows by Joseph Heller, famous as the author of Catch-22, and as in most cases where an author is famous for one book, a lot of what they wrote elsewhere is much better. The other classic example here would be Anthony Burgess, who's most famous for A Clockwork Orange when it's one of the weakest things he ever wrote. Same thing is true with Joe Heller. Catch-22 has a couple of good moments, but most of his bigger, more textured novels are so much better. And this is the one that gets to me. This is the most heartfelt one, I think, about an elderly King David looking back on his life. So historical fiction in a way, but this is not normal historical fiction. It's far more contemporary than that. These are the decisions that anyone who's writing even something that looks like historical fiction have to make. They have to decide how they're going to do it. Not just what they're going to do and how much research it takes, but how they're going to do it. And Joseph Heller does a great job. His King David in the Bible is one of the most memorable, dramatic characters drawn in the Bible. And this is by far the most memorable, dramatic character that Joseph Heller ever created. And I've done a read-along of this book on this channel. I have praised it any number of times. I think you will, it isn't what you're thinking. It isn't. You will be, I think, amazed by how heartfelt it is, how heartbreaking it is, and how funny it is. So I had to include that here. Then we have some science fiction. This is K.W. Jeter. This is Farewell Horizontal. And among many other things, the world building here is about the outside of a skyscraper that is so big that it's practically a world of its own. No one quite knows how far down it goes, and no one quite knows how far up it goes. But the outside of the skyscraper has an ecosystem of its own. Now, this is, of course, extremely exaggerated for science fiction effect, and Jeter does what you want a science fiction author to do. Come up with the idea of a skyscraper that just goes on forever, and then really think about it. Sit down and think about what that would actually be like for the people living on that skin. And that's wonderful. But it extrapolates from reality. Skyscrapers, the outside of skyscrapers really do have an ecosystem of their own. People don't live there. Civilizations don't grow up there. But they really are an amazing place. There are a couple of people who do studies of such a thing, believe it or not. Skyscrapers are also really tall buildings of any kind. What happens with them? They aren't just as barren as you would think, but this is really energetically done. This is one of the many cases in science fiction where the world building premise, these eternal skyscrapers, is, I think, probably a little more interesting than the actual plot. But the actual plot, the author doesn't drop the ball. Then we have the Franco-Prussian War. Natural segue from science fiction. This is Rachel Trastill. She wrote a book a couple of years ago called Bismarck's War, and I still think about it. This is a really good book about the Franco-Prussian War, which does real justice to all of the big personalities involved. It wasn't just Bismarck, but also, I mean, books that are about the Franco-Prussian War inevitably construe from it the next calamitous 100 years. They look at the Franco-Prussian War and say, all right, well, what kind of premonitions was this? Did this offer to the horrendous world that was coming? I don't usually like that. I don't like it when that is too much present in a book, because the events themselves are worth a historical chronicle. They don't have to signify something else. And I was very happy at the balance that this author strikes. So this is probably out in trade paperback. I don't know. I might be blurbed on the trade paperback. But even if I'm not, it might be worthwhile to go and get from your library. Also, our next one, also at your library, it's a staple. This is W. Jackson Bate, who will be known, well, you will have heard his name in every context on this channel. He wrote a great biography of Samuel Johnson, but he also wrote a great biography of John Keats. His biography of Keats is, I think, probably my favorite one. And I've read them all. Oh my. Gigantic tomes about this poor little twerp. I've read huge things. Actually, I can't call this my favorite. I think it is the best one and the most historically insightful. I'm a little bit biased as to Amy Lowell's 2-volume work on Keats, so that probably would be my favorite, and that'll show up in some future Hedgehog book recommendation. But this is an amazing work of biography, and Bate is one of those biographers who's not only absolutely definitive in the way he handles the sources, but has that kind of wonderfully inviting, glacial, godlike narrative tone. Oh, it sounds, from those descriptions, it sounds like it would be boring, but it's actually the exact opposite. It's an amazing tone, that tone of genial omniscience that I don't get very often in biographies anymore. I really don't. I wonder if it isn't fading from the world, as the idea that you are responsible for comprehensive knowledge of your subject fades from academic standards when it comes to writing a biography. Who are you to tell me what I need to know and don't? Maybe you're a bigot. I don't know. Maybe it's fading one way or another. This is if you're interested in reading a biography of Keats, this is a great one to read. Okay, then we have something by Joseph LeConte. I don't think this is out yet, so that might be a little bit of dirty pool. I've already read it, and I thought it was really good. I could have stood it to be a little bit heavier weight, a little bit more extensive, but it was still pretty good, and on a subject that I've never read a book about before. This is The War for Middle-earth, and it is the story of J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and World War II, not World War I. I wouldn't have thought that there was a whole lot to write about there, and I was dead wrong. This is one revelation after another on every page, and it's fairly well done. I mean, it's difficult to recommend any work of modern history or biography next to Bate. And when you read them side by side, I believe you'll immediately see what I mean. There's a kind of paucity, a kind of poverty of modern narrative when it comes to history and biography. A lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time. But this is still, I just found it fascinating. And I think it comes out this month, sometime. I would say that certainly a Tolkien fan must read this book. But I've noticed that a lot of diehard Tolkien fans, they'll stray to nonfiction if it's the letters, but they won't go any further than that. And I don't know if that's true, but this is worth your while if you want to order it. Get requested from your library. Then something by Peter Gwynne. I think I probably recommended this before in a Hedgehog book recommendation, but it was on my mind. This is his big fat biography of Cardinal Wolsey, the King's Cardinal, about the man who was indispensable to Henry VII and who shaped Henry VIII when he was a young man learning about the world. History, military, diplomacy, even theology, which Henry had a pretty strong bend towards on his own. After all, he spent a lot of time thinking that he was going to go into the church. But Wolsey was so much more than that. He was such a big, complicated figure. He is rendered as a caricature by Orson Welles in the movie version of A Man for All Seasons. And he is the pernicious ghost in Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall books. And in a wonderful little grace moment in the TV show, the cable drama. But he's more fascinating than that. And this book goes into a great deal of detail about his machinations on the continent, his thoughts about becoming Pope, and also, naturally at the end, a thoroughgoing investigation of just whether or not he was guilty of Henry's ire. Henry was almost certainly going to have him beheaded. As much as an earth-shattering scandal as that would have been, he was almost certainly gearing up to do that. But not only was he guilty, but if he was, how guilty was he? And Gwynne is a great writer. This is a fascinating biography, just fantastic on its own right. Then we have Sally Coulthard. This is her book, The Book of the Barn Owl. A very graceful meditation, a very graceful natural history on these animals. That if you live in the Northern Hemisphere, in northern countries, so Europe, America, probably these live near you, and you will never know, unless maybe you hear them. Sometimes they have a very distinctive call. They were when I lived in Iowa, they were absolutely ubiquitous, and they're beautiful, ghostly and beautiful. You hear, if you're not familiar with owls, then you will have heard that when they can fly right by you and you don't hear anything. When it first happens, especially if it's a big owl, for a fraction of a second, you doubt your senses. You're not sure you're actually seeing this thing because your eyes are the only thing reporting it to you. And barn owls are very smart, and they're very adept at living in human spaces. And this book is wonderful about them. Just wonderful. I would love to find a print copy of this. Haven't had it in a couple of years. And then we can finish up with I believe this is a Modern Library. It's one of their big anthology volumes. Really interesting stuff. This was edited by Bernard McGinn, who was really one of the only people I can think of who could intelligently edit a volume like this. I think this is Modern Library. The book is The Essential Writings of Christian Mysticism. So it has a long, lovely introduction. Oh yeah, it is Modern Library right up there. It has a long, lovely introduction about what that is and why you should care about it. And then excerpts from fundamental writers going across 1,000 years. And those excerpts are not only expertly chosen and put in the tapestry of the anthology, but wonderfully explained, wonderfully contextualized. What an anthology this is. Oh my. If you're interested in the history of Christianity, you should know the writings of Christian mysticism. I wouldn't say stop here, but you could definitely start here. And if you're interested in just Christianity just in general and its currents of thought, well, this is just fascinating. I think it's just, I have a weak spot for this sort of thing anyway, but I find it absolutely fascinating. A wonderful, wonderful volume on this subject, better than any volume that I know of, except maybe I think there's a big, huge Oxford handbook, like $150, the Oxford Handbook of Christian Mysticism. I think there's one or maybe two volumes of that, but that is so abstruse. This is very much for the normal general interest reader. So there you go. Some Hedgehog book recommendations for you to liven up your Saturday. I'm going to wrap this up before more of the world crashes down on my head. But if with any luck, I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.